So I thought today I would review some clips from a certain pastor. His name is Joel Webbon. If you've heard of him or not, he has been, making waves in certain corners of the internet and has been receiving accusations that he is racist or a Nazi or defending Nazis. And if you know anything about me, what I absolutely hate is pastors getting unjustifiably accused of things. But also, what I absolutely hate is unqualified or poor pastors or wolves who are pretending to be pastors. And so I just want to get to the bottom of this. We don't mind being extreme here. I don't mind extreme opinions. What I do mind is untrue opinions. And so we are going to analyze these clips not for extremeness, but for truth and for consistency. So let's get into the first clip.
When you look at the lay of the land and evangelicals as a whole, I'm nothing to brag about, but I'm one of the best we got. And that's not to say much of me. It is very clearly to insult evangelicals. I will never lose an opportunity to insult evangelicals.
I'm an evangelical. Most Protestant Christians are evangelicals. For most people, I would imagine the instinct is to think of this as arrogance. And in fact, I believe he actually apologized for this statement as arrogant. He actually, incidentally, has apologized for one or two other statements that he's made, recognizing them as arrogant. It is entirely possible that his views actually line up with truth more than the vast majority of evangelicals. And so I'm even going to give him a little bit of grace and say, maybe he's not the best that evangelicalism has. I know he's trying to insult evangelicalism, even though the majority of Christians make up the evangelical community. And yeah, it's true that there are a lot of people who subscribe to evangelical theology who are inconsistent, or they're bad people, or they are politically or socially on horrible sides of certain things. And so let's see the rest of these clips.
The idea of rap being a legitimate source of art and music, I reject. So I'm not just saying, I don't like it because I'm white, and art is perceived by the beholder and it's subjective and different people have different tastes. No, I'm going to go on record saying objectively, if you think that Mozart and 50 Cent or whatever, Jay-Z, that it's just, tomato, then you have a low IQ. You are a stupid person.
So I like art. I care about art. Not a big fan of rap, but I would never go so far as to say rap is not art. I think there's a lot of rap that's absolute garbage, but as somebody who does not like rap, I'm sure there is some rap out there that is artistic, because all rap is, at its core, is just poetry set to a beat. This kind of inflammatory, perhaps thoughtless statement is the kind of thing that makes people, I think, believe that Joel Webbon is a racist. So I'm not necessarily seeing racism here, maybe a little bit of thoughtlessness, maybe a little bit of speaking too quick or trying to be intentionally inflammatory, which I think kind of teeters on deception if people do this too much or on purpose, but I'm not necessarily accusing Joel of any of these things. All I'm doing is noticing things.
Like, I walk around my neighborhood, and it's not that there are different shades of, white and brown. Who cares? No, it's like full, straight up Hindu garb at our neighborhood swimming pool that my daughter is asking. I'm trying to explain. She's like, what, like, and I don't even know what country I'm in my own neighborhood. I don't know where I am. It's, the number of, when we go on a family walk, the number of Pakistani, Hindu, all these different, not just ethnicities, but religions with visible religious outfits on. And, the same thing, like when we go to Costco, I'm like, where am I? And so like it's rare. Like we'll go on a family walk and every now and then we'll pass by, a white family that's a man and a woman and has more than one kid. And every time I see it, I'm like, I don't want to be this way. But I feel like this small sense of relief. Like, I see you. I'm glad you're one of my neighbors. Because at the end of the day, again, it's not about whiteness. But at the end of the day, if things get rough, I don't know if my Hindu neighbor is going to fight to save the lives of my children.
This is yet again the kind of thing that makes people want to call Joel Webbon a racist. From a Christian perspective, if you in fact want your nation to be Christian, I understand the tendency to say, yeah, it's a problem if a bunch of other religions are in my neighborhood. But a lot of Americans actually hate America. I'd say a lot of the foreigners who are trying to own businesses and build up their neighborhoods, those people actually love America more than a lot of Americans. And so if we want to focus on some kind of problem in our New Christendom conferences, if we want to build the New Christendom and spread Christianity across the country, the thing that we have to talk about is not how bad and horrible and awful foreigners are. The thing we have to talk about is how poor our theology is, that we are not evangelizing these people better.
Yes, many Jews died in camps in World War II, although I personally do not have a position on the exact number. And if I ever get around between being a pastor and president of Right Response Ministries and a husband and a father, if I ever have a spare 10,000 hours to speak credibly on the topic, then I'll give you a number. Until then, I'm not going to say, well, it was for sure 6 million. I'm not going to do that because they've lied about everything. And when I say they, I don't mean Jews. I mean everybody, all of our institutions, every credible authority has lied about everything. So I'm not going to just say, oh, yes, sir, you say 6 million. That's what the mainline consensus is. 6 million. So I'm not going to say it's 6 million. At the same time, I'm also not going to give another number. I'm just going to say, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Right. And fortunately,
So a few things are happening in this clip. He is making a few claims that I kind of want to break down. One, he's saying essentially that the people in charge have lied about everything, and so we should have some level of skepticism about anything we hear because it could be a lie. And therefore, what he's doing is choosing not to come down and choose a number for the number of Jews that died in World War II. Okay, I guess. But the other thing he's saying is for somebody to actually be credible enough to make a claim about how many people have died in World War II, evidently you have to spend 10,000 hours to actually come up with a credible number for how many people actually died in World War II. So I'm trying to give him as much grace as I possibly can. It could be argued that we can't trust the consensus of things that we hear in general, and so we should be skeptical of every single thing we hear. But I'm curious how consistent he actually is with that, because we can't really function in society without relying on some kind of consensus for pretty much every single little thing we do. I wonder if he applies that to other parts of his life. We might see the answer in future clips. Let's continue.
Judaism, by nature, in its ideology and its religion, is, I believe, parasitical. And yes, I'm using the word parasitical. I got in trouble because that's something that the church member in our church used on the Zoom call, and everybody's talking about on X, and I don't care. I just, you get what you get with Joel Webbon. So yes, parasitical. I'm not calling each and every Jew parasitical. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Judaism as an ideology and as a religion, I do believe is parasitical. That what it has done historically throughout the ages is typically go into other countries, other peoples, with other religions, and kind of cozy up, but not really for their benefit, not a mutually beneficial relationship, but where they ultimately get far more out of the deal than the Christian nation does. Judaism has thrived on Christendom. If Christendom falls and the West falls and Islam wins the day, Muslims will not play nice with Jews.
Right.
They will be screwed. Jews need Christians. Christians do not need Jews.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question here that's going to sound really, really stupid, but just bear with me. How does he know? How does he know that that is historically what Judaism did? If we cannot rely on historical consensus on things. I wonder if Joel spent 10,000 hours studying history so that he knew exactly how Judaism dealt with every country that they entered into the past. Now, I don't think he did that, and so it kind of seems to me like, I don't know, a little bit of hypocrisy is at play. Another far more interesting thing to note about this clip is the word parasitical in regards to Judaism was first popularized by a very specific individual who wrote a very specific famous book. And the book was called Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. So Adolf Hitler popularized the idea of Jews being parasites. And guess who is repeating that? He has come out on the internet and said that Hitler was a bad guy and that Nazism is bad. Now, I don't know if Joel spent 10,000 hours reading Mein Kampf, or if he studied history enough to know that Adolf Hitler popularized the word parasitical, but I think he absolutely knows. I think he absolutely knows. And all of these little puzzle pieces, even if you give him grace in a lot of these areas, all of these puzzle pieces are kind of adding up. Interesting. So let's see what else Joel has to say.
Of course, spelled RAAA. It's 3 A's and then a Y and then CIST.
The listener needs to know, too, that term racist, you would have very late in the 1800s. Racisme would be the French term. It really doesn't come into use until about the 1940s. It's
French.
a very new term. So
Why the 1940s? What happened in the 1940s?
nothing. It was a really quiet decade, honestly.
Right. So you're saying something significant changed in the 1940s.
A group of people that needed to be labeled a bad word.
Oh, okay. All right.
So that is a...
They're essentially saying the word racism is merely a word that was invented to oppress Nazis. Joel Webbon has also discussed on his podcast how the word racism was never in the Bible. The word racism was never used by the reformers and by a lot of church fathers who they seem to appreciate so much. And therefore, we shouldn't really be using the word racism in our vocabulary. We shouldn't really take accusations of racism seriously. Racism doesn't really exist. However, again, are we being consistent with this? Let's take that exact same idea and apply it to something else, like, say, homosexuality. A lot of people want to use identically the same argument with homosexuality, which didn't enter the Bible until the 21st century. It wasn't originally in the Bible because the Bible wasn't written in English, but the concept of homosexuality was around from the very beginning. The concept of hating another race merely because they're different than you, which is what racism is, if we consider the definition, was around forever. It's always been around. That concept definitely is in the Bible. This is what Paul confronted Peter over in Antioch in the Bible. And so this concept of racism absolutely did exist, and this is a silly leftist tactic that is used to argue for that homosexuality is okay. And so if we apply, like if we connect the dots here, people use this exact same argument to prove that homosexuality is okay from a Christian perspective. And so it's possible that these people are using exactly the same argument with a different word plugged in to prove that racism is okay. Well, because racism doesn't really exist. It's not really a thing that can happen. It's totally okay to hate people who don't look like you. Is that what they think? Why would they be arguing the things that they're arguing if they didn't think that? Strange. Very strange.
Yeah.
Don't sell out the men in your church to the state or to their employer or to anybody. And you could do that with COVID and mRNA vaccines. You can do that with BLM.
Yep.
And selling out men in your church because they weren't woke enough and politically correct enough. And you can also do it with Nazis. You can sell out the men in your church, some who are genuinely just asking questions,
Yep.
and others who actually have gone further than that.
Right.
And really are on the precipice of becoming Hitler apologists.
Right.
And yet, even with them, there's a crown in the gutter, guys. You get mad at me. You get mad at me because the people in your church are watching my podcast.
Right.
You get mad at me because our platform keeps growing. You say, well, he's just platform building. No, you're platform building. You're building my platform.
Yet again, let's think about this. Joel is saying, don't sell out Nazis in your church. Here, undeniably, he's actually defending Nazis. He's saying we should not be selling out Nazis in our church. Now, that's really interesting because from my perspective, I think the biblical perspective is entirely different. Now, if Nazism isn't bad, and it's just something that people can believe, and it's an opinion thing, and it's fine for people to think that, for wanting to call for the eradication of Jews, that's cool. That's a totally biblical position to have. That freedom of conscience, after all, if that is what somebody believes, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely outrageous. But he compares this to a liberal church selling out people in their church for issues regarding BLM and social justice and things like that. But let's consider it from the other way. If you're a conservative church, should you allow social justice ideology to thrive in your church? And the answer is no. Should you allow any kind of sinful ideology to thrive in your church if you are a pastor? Well, the answer is no. So if Nazism is in fact a sinful ideology, then as a pastor, you absolutely should crush it, because that's actually what a pastor is supposed to do. A pastor, the word pastor means shepherd, and a shepherd's job is to protect the sheep. And if wolves are coming in and devouring the sheep, then you're actually doing a really poor job as a pastor. If you are defending wolves who are coming in and devouring the sheep, you're actually doing a bad job as a pastor. And so we're starting to see this picture where Joel Webbon really literally is defending Nazism. That's not to say he is a Nazi himself. There were plenty of pastors who were not woke themselves, who were defending wokeness, who were allowing wokeness to slither into their church. And I think this is exactly the same way. There were plenty of pastors who weren't woke, who attended woke conferences and spoke at woke conferences and allowed woke pastors to come speak at their church, and who partnered with woke pastors. All of this is bad. We've been through this years ago. We know all of this is bad. And when it's repeated, just with a different disguise on, we ought to be able to see that this is also bad. So this doesn't necessarily mean that Joel Webbon is a Nazi, but undeniably in this clip, he was actually defending Nazis. He's saying, whoa, we shouldn't be selling out those people in our church. If there are Nazis in your church, and this ideology is allowed to thrive, your pastor's doing a bad job. There can be people in your church who have all kinds of horrible beliefs, but they need to know that what they believe is sinful. And then if a person chooses to believe that anyway, like, okay, but we in our churches need to actively be trying to crush the things that are serious problems. So interesting. That's a huge problem. That's a serious red flag. Interesting. Okay, continuing.
You replace a white man with a person of color and have them say the same thing. Or you replace a white man with a white woman and have her say the same thing, right? So it's like, we need to say something as conservatives against this onslaught of progressivism and blah, blah, blah. And so we need a stalwart. We need, when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Lord raises a standard bearer against him. Who are you going to call? Ali Beth Stuckey, Samuel Say, and it's like, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. If these people are saying true things, great, kind of great. Ali Beth, I'd love for her to say powerful, true things in her home to her children.
So he's basically saying that certain people he disagrees with shouldn't have platforms. And I actually agree with that. Certain people really should not have platforms on the internet. But here's an interesting thing. I'm concerned with consistency. I actually agree with Joel Webbon's statement here. Certain people who have certain views absolutely should not have platforms on the internet. People should not support them. Would you say that hypocrites should have a platform on the internet? I mean, they have the freedom to, obviously. They should have the freedom to. But morally, if you're a hypocrite, should you be spreading your lies to people? Here's something really interesting. He was saying essentially that Ali Beth Stuckey shouldn't have a platform. Well, so somebody shared this interesting post on X that says, Joel Webbon is still promoting the time he went on Ali Beth Stuckey's program on his own website. Didn't seem too mad she wasn't staying home with the kids that day. It's all engagement farming. They aren't convictions, they are clickbait. That's kind of interesting, because also another accusation that Joel Webbon receives is, like he said, he is platform building. His opinion absolutely has changed on certain things, evidently like Ali Beth Stuckey, except he to the day that this was posted, December 12th, not very long ago, he was promoting the fact that he was on Ali Beth Stuckey's program. Somebody else posted, just sitting here reminiscing about that one time when Joe Webbon was on Allie Beth Stuckey's podcast. And then Allie Beth Stuckey herself replied, she's a conservative, she's a female with a platform, and I have the outrageous, egregious view that actually women are free to have podcasts if they want. Wow. Controversial take. Women are free to have podcasts. Allie Beth Stuckey herself says, and it wasn't even an organic interview. This was an ad spot that he paid for. So Joel Webbon is giving money to platforms that he thinks should not exist. Or does he? Maybe he thinks they should exist and he wants to use them to build his platform. Fascinating. Now, if there's a platform that I hate, you better believe that I'm never going to have anything to do with that platform, unless it's a debate or something like that. But I'm never going to pretend to snuggle up to somebody who I fundamentally disagree with or who I think their platform shouldn't exist. Fascinating. Allie Beth Stuckey also says, just want to clarify, first and only time for my show, there was an ad package that included a 10-minute interview. I don't sell my own ads. We have salespeople to do that. And that's what they'd agreed to. I didn't like it, and so I never allowed it again. Someone actually posted pushing back on Joel about this. He said, our fathers didn't pay to be interviewed by women. They would have believed this is sniveling, weak behavior from a Christian nationalist patriarch. And Joel Webbon wanting to defend himself from this crowd, because this is the crowd of people who he wants to ingratiate himself to. He says, it was 4.5 years ago. I wanted to do anything I could to speak out about COVID deceptions, but you're right. By God's grace, I continue learning and growing. Fair. That's actually a really good response. It was 4.5 years ago. It was a really long time ago. Maybe Joel has changed his mind, except there's a little bit of an inconsistency. Somebody shared this link that says, Pearl Davis interviews Pastor Joel Webbon, Biblical Patriarchy and Christian Nationalism from April 16th, 2024. He was on multiple women's podcasts who he just recently said women shouldn't have platforms on the internet. And that was just April 16th. So that wasn't 4.5 years ago. Really seems like there is some intentional deception happening. Pastors cannot be hypocritical. Pastors cannot be deceptive.
Jen Wilkin is a masculine woman. Mm-hmm. In her voice, she tries to convey with a vocal fry a level of gravitas that she naturally doesn't have because she's a woman. Colin Hansen is an effeminate man who is overweight, lispy.
I don't like Jim Wilkin or Colin Hansen, by the way. I don't like those people. But what I do really dislike is hypocrisy. So whenever we call out people for certain speech mannerisms or whatever they have that are effeminate, then we open ourselves to be called out for those exact same things. And one thing that this fine fellow does, wearing his suit, talking about effeminate men, is interrogatives. You know what an interrogative is? It's when the end of your sentence goes up as if you're asking a question.
Mm-hmm. In her voice, she tries to convey with a vocal fry a level of gravitas that she naturally doesn't have because she's a woman. Colin Hansen is an effeminate man who is overweight, lispy.
Her voice, vocal fry, gravitas. You know who talks like that? Valley Girls. It's actually a known effeminate or feminine voice pattern in speaking. So if you talk like this, it's very non-committal and it sounds like you're gay or a woman. So I'd kind of recommend not doing that, especially at the same moment when you're insulting somebody else for the way that they speak. I wonder if this guy does anything else that's gay. He certainly wouldn't admit it.
It might be my most gay view, but I think men should, out of respect. And I've known family members and other women who have said, yeah, this can trigger thoughts. And I think out of respect and love for those sisters in Christ.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would recommend, again, especially if your BMI is under 30, wear some type of sleeveless shirt at the beach.
Yeah.
If your BMI is under 30, which is really easy to do, like 30 is very high. If your BMI is under 30, you should wear a sleeveless shirt at the beach to trigger thoughts, which is a derogatory term for women, which means that hoe over there, THOT. So we want, as Christians, of course, we want to trigger hoes by wearing sleeveless shirts if our body mass index is under a certain percentage. I think these are the same kinds of people who think yoga pants are bad at the gym. Is that consistent? Interesting.
Mocking.
And mocking.
Here's the thing,
And,
mocking, there is a biblical, theological case for mocking. And And mockery is absolutely effective. It can be done in a sinful
biblical.
and biblical.
Yep.
So, well, that's why I said it. There's a theological case for it. So it's mocking is permissible
Yep.
in biblical terms.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that that it's always right. You can do it wrongly. You can do it rightly. So, and that's in the moral sense, in the biblical sense. But then there's the sense of how is it effective or not, and it is highly effective. We need anon accounts to mock certain people off of Twitter. There are certain people who are on X right now who need to be on blue skies. And by God's grace, a lot of them have left.
That's right.
Still waiting on Owen Strand. But there are some others that I think by God's grace, if we can get just a few more anon accounts, I think we can do it.
Yep.
The sad thing is, I loosely agree with a lot of Joel Webbon's like secondary opinions on things. Like, I too am not an Owen Strand fan. But to call for anonymous accounts to go mock somebody off the internet like little internet children bullies, that's kind of effeminate. Men fight their battles head on. Some Christians have had an issue with him saying that mockery is a biblical thing to do. I actually agree with him there too. I think mockery absolutely is a biblical thing. But the thing that we need to understand is that there is a right kind of mockery and a wrong kind of mockery. We don't just call random all of the anonymous accounts on the internet to go bully somebody. That's ridiculous. In fact, Joel Webbon has a history of sending anon accounts to do his bidding like a coward. Here's an example of a post that he sent to his private Signal group regarding a pastor he didn't like, who he's called Owen Strand, his brother in Christ. And so he's essentially calling people to bully brothers in Christ off of internet platforms. So here's an example of Joel Webbon wanting to bully another person who he has admitted is a brother in Christ. He says, last thing, it'd be a real shame if a dozen anon accounts, or anon, if you're Joel Webbon, took my above messages, edited them as a cohesive thread, and tweeted them out. A genuine crying shame. And previous to that, he wrote this big long message about how horrible and awful this guy Tobias is. If this has kind of put a bad taste in your mouth for Joel Webbon, this very last clip, I think, is the nail in the coffin.
The Christian ministers who are looking you in the eye right now and saying these disparities don't exist, every young man in the world can pick up their phone and in 15 seconds can see that the average IQ in Haiti is 67.
Right.
And any Christian minister who denies that will not have any credibility. They won't.
Credibility, but it is a sin to God's
'Cause you're a liar.
manifested reality.
You're a liar.
It's not true.
You
I
cannot
won't
be a
say it.
minister of the gospel and be a public liar.
Right.
That's you're disqualified from ministry, from lying. You can't be a liar and be a minister of the gospel.
Now, there is a lot to break down about this, actually. You cannot be a minister of the gospel and be a liar. We've already seen a pretty heavy measure of hypocrisy and possible deception from Joel Webbon, intentional or not. But it's very interesting that the other guy on his show, who he agreed with, said that the way God manifests reality, we have to admit that or else we're lying. I actually completely agree with that. But how is this Haitian IQ thing calculated? Isn't that some kind of consensus? Didn't Joel say that consensus is unreliable? That we can't rely, that he doesn't have 10,000 hours to spend, except he's relying on some kind of statistic he found. 67. Now what's really, there's so much here. So what Joel Webbon said, unequivocally he said this, it's very clear. So if you don't believe that Haitian IQ is actually what it is, and you say that it is something different than what it actually is, you're a liar and you're disqualified for ministry. He also said that it's so easy to just look up the real stats.
Every young man in the world can pick up their phone and in 15 seconds can see that the average IQ in Haiti is 67.
And so those men with cell phones picked up their phones and looked up the stat. And it actually turns out that Haitian IQ is an average of 82.1, not 67. And so if what Joel Webbon said is true, and if you say that the IQ of Haitians is something different than what it actually is, which Joel Webbon did, then you are disqualified for ministry.
It is a sin to God's
'Cause you're a liar.
manifested reality.
You're a liar.
I could say that based on all of the things that we've heard about Joel Webbon recently, that he is a wolf. that he is a hypocrite, that he is being intentionally deceptive. He absolutely is platform building and is not worth taking seriously because he obviously changes his opinions wherever the winds of culture blows because he wants to get the attention of people as easily as possible. And he has chosen that the goons with the red profile pictures and the blue laser eyes are stupid enough to follow him. And so he's using his silly accent and talking about how we should defend Nazis to get those people on his team. I could say that, but I won't. All I'm doing is noticing things. In fact, Joel Webbon defends people for noticing things a lot. And so all I'm doing is noticing. And what I am noticing is that I don't actually have to declare Joel Webbon unqualified for ministry at all because he has actually just done it himself.
Cannot be a minister of the gospel and be a public liar.
Right.
The way I don't think pastors should be saying stupid things like this. But if you believe that Haitian IQ is something other than what it actually is, even though Joel Webbon also said you can't make claims about specific numbers of things like that unless you have 10,000 hours to spend. And yet he does anyway. If you believe that Haitian IQ is something other than what it is, and you say it, you are a liar and you're unqualified for ministry. Interesting. So regardless of my own opinions, if you are a follower of Joel Webbon and you actually agree with what Joel Webbon says, then you, with him, should agree with him and actually call him to step down from ministry. It's interesting to see the inconsistency in people. Inconsistency is a really, really bad trait. Of all of the people that Jesus really, really didn't like in the Bible, hypocrites, I think, was at the top of the list. Jesus let people off with a lot of sins and was still very gracious to them. But if they were hypocrites, Jesus had really, really sharp words. Not only that, but this kind of thing is exactly why the Bible says that teachers will be judged more harshly. Because if people are spreading lies or deception and they have a platform, especially when they're trying to build a platform and reach more people on purpose so that they can spread nonsense, through spreading nonsense, trying to build their platform, I don't think that God likes that very much. So I don't know. You be the judge. Should we agree with Joel Webbon and the things that he says, in which case he is disqualified for ministry like he himself admits? Or should we disagree with Joel Webbon? And hey, again, if you've made it this far and you're a Joel Webbon supporter, I just wanted to tell you, I'm only noticing things. And is that really that bad?